Hello, everyone. Welcome to Family Table Talks. I'm Heidi Mendenhall, your Executive Director of First Five, and
I'm Jennifer Torres. I'm the Enrollment Manager for Northern California. Thank you so much for joining us today.
yes, we are super excited to be here together in Tehama. Same location. We are moving down those tiers, and we are all working really hard to be able to do things like this and get back to as much normalcy as we can. And thinking about that idea of normalcy,
What is normal?
right?
What's that mean?
And as child development people, we don't do that word very well, really.
Not really. We call it typically developing.
And so that's what we want to talk about today. We want to talk about parent expectations and kind of thinking more along the lines of understanding child development and asking questions rather than having expectations of exactly how something should be. Because, I don't know about you, but since day one as a parent, any expectation I had, the only thing that was guaranteed was that it was going to change.
Every day. And with every child.
Yeah. And what you think you know, you don't really know.
You don't know. No. And what works for one child doesn't work for the other one.
So we want to take a step back and think about this. And the reason that it came to the table is because we were talking about the things that have changed in the world and the fact that our children have had many very different experiences over the last year than maybe children had even 2 years ago, right? And so what does that look like? How does that change their social interactions? How does that change how their language develops? And we kind of circle back to, well, it's not really any different than when you just pay attention to the child and you learn the child, because every child is unique. Every child develops at their own pace, and we can have an idea. We can have an idea of what the road might be, and that, now most of the time they learn to pull the stand, and then after that they learn to kind of balance and teeter, and if they're really adventurous, they learn to teeter and plop really quick, and eventually they take a step or two. We have this idea, this kind of journey that will happen, but every kid does it slightly different.
Yeah, and the one that I hear the most, the one that comes up the most is potty training. And even though we're not actually talking about potty training today in general, it is actually a developmental milestone. And parents' expectations of the age when a child should be potty training is, I hate to say this, but it is bonkers sometimes. No, a 9-month-old should not be potty trained because they don't have the skill set yet to do it. But every child's different. So I've had, my granddaughter Arabella potty trained herself at 18 months, but it was totally free. It wasn't something that her parents forced on her. She actually did it by herself because she didn't like being wet in her diaper. But like my two daughters potty trained together. They're only 2 years apart, and when they were little, I had the youngest when my daughter had turned 2, and she was potty training at that time, and then she stopped using the toilet altogether and wanted to use diapers because the baby sister was in diapers, and so they actually potty trained each other basically when they were about three and a half, and 1.5. So they did it together.
That's such a good example of variety, and also a good example of how really throughout life we learn something and then sometimes we kind of regress. But in childhood, especially really early childhood, that happens a lot more frequently and you notice it a lot more. And so, for example, specifically with potty training, you might be seeing that, oh, their diapers are staying really dry and maybe they're staying dry at night. And so you start going back into underwear. And then all of a sudden, what seems to you out of nowhere, they completely regress and they start having accidents all the time. And it can feel really frustrating as a parent, like maybe you're not doing something right. Or I've even heard well, I think they're doing it on purpose to get attention. And I don't know about you, but I wouldn't purposely live in wet clothes. So I'm really going to guess it's not a purposeful thing there. But most of the time, it has to do with that you don't actually own the skill. To truly own a skill and really have it embedded into your brain such that it is automatic and it's going to happen in all different types of situations and be generalized across all different types of environments, you actually have to practice it in all those different places, all those different environments. And until you're given all those situations, like, I'm super exhausted, I'm tired, I've had nothing but sugary juice today, and I don't want to stop playing this game. Until you've had that situation and then you've not accidentally had an accident, you haven't actually generalized the skill, right? And so, especially as young children, they haven't had the same lived experiences we've had. So it takes a lot more variety in order to really create those synapses for them to learn. Another great example I wanted to share is some of my best friends live next door to me, and oh, they are lovely, and they have a 3.5-year-old that I just love to pieces. And the other day, he was wandering around with a bat, plastic bat, wiffle ball bat, tapping everything he could, fairly lightly tapping, but tapping everything he could to see what the, like, just doing it. And his mom is just like looking at him like, "Whoa, okay, deep breath, because she's told him multiple times, like, the bat hits a ball, nothing else. And so, this kind of expectation that he should be following the rule that the bat hits a ball and nothing else. That's her parent expectation. And I kind of jokingly was like, you know what he's doing? He's practicing physical science. He's figuring out, what does it sound like when something I hit is with something that's alive, like a tree? How does it sound when I hit these leaves? How does it sound when I hit this metal sign? How does it sound when I hit my
Mhm.
brother? Right? All these different varieties. And by shifting that perspective at seeing like what he was actually doing, you can kind of shift your parent expectation and realize, okay, well, I can expect him to not hit his brother, but maybe I should also expect him to be experimenting. And then if you don't want him experimenting with the bat, then take the bat away.
Right. And exploring their environment is another one.
Right. In all ways possible,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, because we want our kids to be perfect, and we want them to be on their best behavior, and so. But what does a best behavior look for a 3-year-old? Well, it's them taking a bat and hitting things that hear what they sound like, and understanding those different pieces of development, and rejoicing and celebrating their curiosity, and then talking to them about, because you can't reason with a 3-year old, but you can have conversations with a 3-year old about what that means to them. All right, because it makes their gets their little minds going. That's
Yes,
what I'm
it
trying to
does.
say.
Yeah, right. Little, yeah.
Right. But parent expectations, I'm telling you right now, if you don't if you have an expectation of your child, and and it doesn't sound quite right, because maybe your friend, they have a child the
Yes.
same age and they're doing something that's way advanced, but your kid isn't, and you're not sure whether or not they should be at that level, talk to someone. We have Help Me Grow is an excellent resource to talk about it. Talk to your home visitor, talk to your preschool teacher or your primary caregiver, talk to your pediatrician when you go in for well baby checks. I mean, they all are trained in this information of what developmental milestones look like, because they're going to look different between every child. And even with a family as big as mine, with as many kids as we've got, all our kids did things differently at different ages. Not one was the same. Not one.
Right.
And so even with my first one, I was like, kind of, I kind of had to figure it out on my own. But then I had my next one, and I was like, that one was definitely not like the first one, and the third one was the same. So they're all different.
I think it's like the mean little gift that, like, oh, you think you know, but you don't really know.
Right. And parenting expectations, parenting each of your children. If you only have one, bless your heart. But if you have more than one, your parenting style is going to be different for each child, because each child is going to need something different from you. And so if you go into it expecting that you're going to be parenting each child the same way, I want to rip that illusion away from you right now, because each child really is unique in their own personalities and how they develop. So they're going to need something different from you at each of their milestones.
And granting yourself grace in that. Like, one is does not have to be the same for all. And grant yourself grace the way you do for your children too. And being curious and noticing, like, well, what worked with my parent expectation for this kid and what's working for my next child, and asking those questions about what they might be learning. I love that you mentioned Help Me Grow, because Help Me Grow is not only for if you have a concern or you're wanting to know if your child is on track, but rather like, well, what are the developmental milestones? Like, what
Mhm.
could they be doing next? There's also a great website called All About Children. Yep, allaboutchildren.org. We'll put it down in the notes. And they not only have what kinds of milestones are being developed in 0 to 5.5 year olds, they also have some potential child parent tips or parent language that can be used to
Mhm.
help go to that next developmental level. And so, for example, with a little boy testing out how different kinds of material sound and testing out this scientific inquiry, you could be thinking about, oh, well, I wonder if a different object would make that same sound. What else could we use? And you could then, steer them away from using what you didn't want them to be using and tapping, while also helping their development. And the
Mhm.
same is true for potty training and asking, like, well, what signs has my child given me? What am I noticing about that child? And then utilizing the information from these websites to help you. So, parent expectations are hard. We all have them. It's a constant battle. When Jen and I got here, I was sharing with an experience that I was having around my own parenting expectations and teeth brushing and what that looks like. So you can tune into 2 episodes ago if you want to hear us talk about our oral health world,
Mhm.
and just think about like that at the end of the day, we have to grant ourselves grace and do the best we can each moment and pay attention to our kids.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's all about grace. And just so you know, it never ends. Because even though we talk about 0 to 5, I mean there's a whole nother gamut of development after that. And you hit K through 12, and then things shift and they become adults, and yeah, it's kind of a crazy ride, but I would not give anything up for it. It's been crazy, but I've loved it every minute.
Well, thank you for joining us. Thank you for being parents. Thank you for being families. Thank you for being grandparents. Thank you for making time for what matters: conversation, our local community, and our kids.
Thank you. We'll see you next time.